Project we're going to take you through is the Carringbush Hotel in Abbotsford, obviously in the heritage category. So, excited about it's one of those slightly unusual projects, as many of them seem to be. We worked with the client on and off for about 10 years. Previously did a brick warehouse in Richmond, which they've been hanging on to, being basically built out on every side, and eventually they gave in and sold it, but only on the condition because they found this pub for sale and bought the whole building. It was kind of interesting. They were sort of up against Andrew McConnell to buy this pub in Abbotsford, and the brief effectively had two major parts. It's the former Friendly Society's hotel, and they effectively needed to be their inner city home for them as clients. They run a fashion distribution business, so they also needed it to work as additional showroom space and as a residence for their visiting kind of clients, but then also for them to reconfigure the ground floor to make it a separate tenancy. It was really critical for them that it stayed as a pub, but then they worked with a local operator to make sure it was a vegan pub, so it was actually about separating out that tenancy, so we then worked on the rest of the space. Building itself is pretty much in the middle of Abbotsford, right next to the train tracks, bounded by Hoddle, Nicholson, Language and Gips. It's a neighbourhood residential zone. It's a heritage overlay on the whole area, and it's just under 400 square metres as a site. As you can see there, it is really close to the train track. It is literally backs onto it, and the warehouse is on the other side of the tracks there. Interesting area in terms of the history of the Friendly Society's hotels is that sort of their connection as a civic presence in amongst the workers' cottages. It's effectively a two-storey masonry building. Building itself is 1889, former Friendly Society's hotel, individually significant for a number of reasons, not just as a double-storey Victorian corner hotel, but also its sort of social presence, which the client was really interested in terms of making sure it had a social presence and wasn't a closed-off building. And architecture is significant because of the sort of elaborate nature and presence of its street facades, but also the rear facades in terms of their use of advertising. See there was a series of sort of signs painted on the back over the years of various, generally advertising alcohol, that were sort of keen to make sure that was sort of kept intact and that its history was preserved through this new layer. Initially, the site, when they took it over, was all 2 floors were commercial. Effectively, the upstairs had been a rooming house at some point, so it was cut up into sort of 12 individual rooms, but had been empty for quite a lot of the time upstairs. And then, so part of our first investigation is obviously to understand the facade and reinstate that, identify areas such as original fireplaces and archworks, but work back through where there had been original cornicing that had generally been sort of cut up and eroded, to make sure we went through this process of understanding and reinstating the primary volumes to give some legibility back to the space. Quite a useful thing we did in the end was, because we were able to do interior works without needing a planning permit, we went through a level of demolition which was really to understand what was there before whilst the main permit was being processed. That effectively separated out the yellow as a ground floor pub tenancy again, so that the white entry for the ground floor and all of the first floor became the brief we were working in for the clients. Pre-demo, it was quite weird, a bit illegible, and interestingly, after that process, we really started to see effectively where all of these spaces have been cut up, cut through cornices, cut through skirtings, and really just sort of understand it while we then worked on the design process, whilst the town planning for the facades that the rear was being worked through. So it was a really great process working with both the client and the builder we worked with before. There was a lot of trust in the process and wanting to do it properly.
It also really helped the client being able to see those final spaces that they were going to work with, and effectively change some of the planning elements in terms of the private retreat.
So it went from being all commercial effectively to the sort of ready pink there is then residential with the commercial below. That results in a floor plan where sort of loosely has the former Collingwood Football Club club room, becomes their sort of studio space, so guest residence workspace overflow, connecting through to an ensuite, which is formerly the outdoor area of the pub that had already been filled in and made into a storeroom for them, connecting up through to a suite of living spaces, kitchen, dining, living, library, snug, through into a contemporary intervention retreat at the back, which is bathroom and dressing room, bedroom as a heritage room, and then out onto a terrace. So the former meat safe was unused as a gym area. If that is, maybe it's actually split through that one there. The stair is quite an interesting part of it in terms of the contemporary stair, but it kept the flow of the old one in terms of coming to a mid-landing and moving from there.
So three sort of approaches to the heritage. One was about pure restoration. We were looking at the original cornicing, the skirting, in addition to the volumes of those sort of simple things that were really quite valuable to the client. Reinstatement in terms of just basically that was basically also spatial volume, and then looking at areas of true innovation, where they were very contemporary insertions and jewels. So facade work is really the most idea about restoration in terms of turning it back back to a single line wash paint, keeping the existing Friendly Society and Carringbush signage, but sort of painting over that and looking through a sort of more significant heritage colour scheme. So they were the primary.
Working with quite sort of good experienced people in that terms, in terms of what the right paint and quality would be to give it that monolithic quality that had textural clarity, just bring a little bit more tone on the signage, but actually not making it a feature.
And then also internal features. So the original stair archway was quite damaged, and that was fully restored. And the spatial program and the way you circulated is all as per the original. The stair itself was changed through, but that was a very important part of that, keeping the heritage of that original archway. And then
working through reinstatement was really about understanding when those volumes came back, reinstating the cornices, reinstating the skirting boards, remaking the window frames where they needed to be made in a traditional sense. So really about what was being replicated to match existing, and that was just a great uncovering process effectively in terms of making that work. And then working then with contemporary elements to be really purposeful in terms of proportion and alignment, because the client's brief was for a very open and connected suite of spaces, but working with fine steel so that the elegance of them wasn't competing with the heritage fabric, but also we chose the moments where to be more confident with contemporary interventions. So elements even like through to their bedroom, yes, the robe and the bathroom are a contemporary intervention, but the cornices and skirtings in the heritage room were effectively a restoration project. So that's the volumes, as you said, where we basically started to understand them during the design process to pull the main primary reception room back as a single volume, but then obviously connected through to the other spaces.
And the studio downstairs was originally the football club meeting rooms. We sort of kept that space. It's a meeting room for the client. It's a showcase room. There's a kitchenette in there, and sort of through a hidden door you get through to this ensuite behind. And then the stair, as we said, is kind of the biggest piece of intervention really was originally conceived as a timber element, and then through a bit of value engineering and just finding the right craftsperson, there was an auto body maker who was able to just provide a cheaper, sharper element. So again, the modern staircase sat in like the metal armatures and everything contemporary had this sharpness about it, so it was very much defined.
And the main sort of contemporary internal move was effectively to take all of this wing as a new timberline box, which housed the bathroom and robe. It's a fashion client was quite a big part of their brief, so purposefully leaving the original volumes, going through a transition into a timberline space, which then is essentially a vaulted timber room of their robe, connecting through to the bedroom and back.
That provides a sort of essential removal from one heritage space to their heritage bedroom, but it's a contemporary essential transition.
Framing that Vickers gin sign on the original meat store, and the best part of their brief was the bathroom. They were really up for the bathroom having a 4 metre by 3 metre window onto the train tracks. So the other we dealt with was contemporary inventions at the back, so looking to the train tracks from the kitchen. They loved the urban context of that in terms of this location in Abbotsford, not wanting to close themselves off from it, but actually embrace that. New openings to again, and then, yeah, we've got that photo in there at the back. There was a series of 4 contemporary openings to the rear facade that were then done purposefully as simple elements to not compete with the original, but to be the next layer of history. And they've kind of embraced their view from their shower to the train tracks. They've had a...
You'll run out of question time,
I think that we're there, actually. Thank you for that whirlwind talk.